I would go into meetings and someone got offended one time when, and a lot of people got offended when I started talking openly about my sobriety and my use. And they're like, you keep that for the rooms. I was like, keep what for the rooms? They're like, oh, you shouldn't be talking about what you did in the past outside of the rooms. I was like, what room? They're like, AA. And I was like, wait a second. If I want to tell people I smoked crack and did crazy shit, that's on me. It's
right.
Not business.
Mm-hmm. Welcome back to Hope to Hustle. I have my dear and amazing friend, Mike Diamond. Hi, Mike.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm always good.
Yeah, I love that. Always good?
Yeah, always good. Always grateful.
Always grateful. I'm always grateful too. Gratitude and abundance for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sitting here with you in this beautiful studio. You're looking fabulous. I mean, I don't have my head in a toilet somewhere snorting lines of cocaine, making bad choices. So I'm pretty good and grateful.
Doing okay today.
I'm doing great. It's all good.
I love that. Well, thank you for coming out here and making the trip. It's been a good day so far. And thank you for speaking with me at the Red Ribbon Run for our small little community here in Hollister. I think it was a really good turnout. It was fun.
First of all, thanks for having me out. It was really special. What I find really, I learned this thing years ago, and this guy told me that wherever you go, carry the same message, but make sure that the message has the same impact of whether it's one person or 10,000 people. Obviously, the volume will be different, but you want to make sure you're authentic. And if you're authentic, it cuts through. And I felt like today was really special because all those people, they were there for a reason, you know?
Yeah, it makes you want to just know all of their stories. I'm looking around and I'm like, okay, are you in recovery? Are you here because you have a loved one that's currently struggling with addiction, you know? So especially runs like that, because I feel like there's so much purpose behind it. You know, I mean, me personally, opiates was my drug of choice. So it, you know, and our shirts having the, you know, basically screw fentanyl on the back of it. To me, it's like, I wish I could hold it up higher and scream a little louder type deal, you know, and having a brother that's struggling, it just, that really was more personal for me. So I'm sure that everybody there was going through similar things, you know? Yeah.
I have a question for you. Do you think that, opiates never clicked with me. Like I did opiates. They just didn't, I don't know if it's because of my, opiate receptors in my brain. I have a massive threshold for pain, but being ADHD, I don't have the dopamine receptors. So it was always cocaine, crack, like something, a stimulant. Do you feel that if someone uses opiates, even if they aren't an addict, they'll get addicted?
Yes. After a certain period of time, people will. I believe it's like 10 days is what I've seen. Because I have the couple of facilities. And so we have people that call and say, I'm not an addict, but I was prescribed pain meds for a recent surgery or, you know, a car accident, whatever it is that they were prescribed. And what I've found over the years too is that they'll give a prescription of, 50 Norcos with 2 refills, which is crazy to me, with zero knowledge or education on, okay, here's a prescription, take it for pain as needed. But if you take it for long enough, be prepared that now you've become physically and mentally dependent on it. And I've had so many individuals reach out and say, I had this medication, I stopped taking it, and I think I'm experiencing withdrawal symptoms. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, what symptoms are you experiencing? You know, and feeling clammy, sleep insomnia, and restless legs. I'm like, oh yeah, you're absolutely experiencing withdrawal symptoms. But they don't have any knowledge of it. So all it takes is a couple weeks, you're taking it every single day, and now they are addicted, even if they weren't in a category of addiction and they're not buying it off the streets. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it definitely is. And for me, it was a replacement, right? That dopamine and feeling that sense in which they say like heroin is better than sex. I mean, it's a very true statement because it's replacing times like 1,000, so there's no love or intimacy cravings at all because you've replaced that with a synthetic drug. And usually then I've noticed too, having the facility with opiate addicts, then that sex drive comes back much stronger in treatment, right? When they take away the substances. So it's something, it's interesting to see because then we start seeing love addiction and all of those things start popping up because that's what those endorphins and that we're lacking. Yeah. They're trying to find it in other ways too.
So what do you think? Because like for me, I got sober in 12-step programs, right? Mm-hmm. But there's this weird thing right now, like especially because like, Gabor Mate, Dr. Mate, right? And he says it's not a disease, it's trauma-based, right? Mm-hmm. And I know definitely for me, both my grandfathers died of alcoholism. But I had massive trauma, like not even a question. Mental, physical, sexual, all the abuse was there, right? So do you think that when he says that it's just trauma-based, we remove the trauma, that the addiction goes? Because you know what I'm saying? It's such a weird thing now with science because it was like, well, you're an alcoholic, it's a disease. I'm not saying, and I'm not saying it's not a disease. It's just a very interesting. We're in a different time now.
Well, and I think what's hard is, see, for me, I didn't get sober through the 12 steps. I went to a cognitive based program, and what we learned through treatment was it's a choice. You're not an addict. So I've found myself in, and I'm really glad that we're bringing this up because this is a touchy subject. And I'm sure that listeners are listening a little closer on this one because we also learned things in moderation, which was interesting, right? So if it's not negatively, so let me take it back a little bit. When somebody says, how do I know if I'm an alcoholic? There's different levels of alcoholism.
Correct.
There's the alcoholic who never drinks, and when they do drink, they go hard and they're crashing cars or landing themselves in jail. They're blacking out. Or there's the alcoholic who's never been blacked out drunk, but has to have 2 glasses of wine every single day to unwind and to go to sleep. Now they're dependent on it for sleep. So my answer to that is if it's negatively affecting your life in any area of your life, it's a problem.
Disempowering, yeah.
Yeah. You can't compare yourself and say, well, I'm not an alcoholic because I've never been wasted. I'm not that bad, right? Well.
So here's a question for you because it's funny. So that's why like when I say dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, right? Mm-hmm. Even though I went through the 12 steps, as soon as I stopped drinking, I just had no craving to drink again, right? Mm-hmm. Even with Coke. Mm-hmm. Okay, but the first time of cocaine I did, I was addicted. I was like, oh, I want to do this all the time. But then when I stopped, I stopped.
Right.
So it's funny because today, I think the guy you talked about came up to me and said, oh, all the stuff you talked about is cognitive behavioral therapy. And when I read that stuff, which was early Socrates-based, Socratic questioning, it just clicked to me. And when people come up to me and they're like, oh, you don't really talk 12 steps. You talk more cognitive behavioral therapy, think, feel, act, my choice. I believe it's always my choice.
Right.
To make the empowering or disempowering choice.
Right.
But do you, when you just said, which I think is really interesting, and people just blame the victim of the disease, right? They don't take responsibility.
Or then they have a relapse and it's like, well, it's because I have a disease.
Right.
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 So
yeah.
I see it both ways. And when I first got sober, it's like you go into the rooms and it's like, hi, I'm Cheree. I'm an alcoholic addict. That personally didn't sit right with me to say that. And this is just me speaking personally, right? And there's a lot of people that can relate and a lot of people that are going to be raising their hands here and say, I beg to differ. I have something completely opposite to say. What their recovery looks like for them and what it looks like for me may be different, and that's okay. For me, I had a hard time standing up and saying, hi, I'm Cheree. I'm an addict. But I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not using any drugs. I'm not addicted to it. I'm not waking up needing dope just to feel okay today. And I held that pretty high and pretty proud that I'm not an addict today. I'm coming up on 12 years sober from opiates, So it's different. However, this is my life. I speak around recovery, and we have our clients at our facilities that go to meetings every single day, and introducing them to, the 12 steps. And I have family members who, for them, have to go to a meeting to maintain their sobriety. And I have an uncle who has, I believe, 13 years now. And he goes to a meeting every single day. That's what he does for his recovery. I love meetings. I love the rooms. I love going to them when I attend conferences. I just had a different approach when I got sober, and it worked for me. It was one program, and I didn't have to look back on that. So it's a different subject, because I know that there's a lot of people that would agree and also a lot that would disagree.
Well, I just think the problem is there shouldn't be one way.
No.
And I think, like, for me, like, I would go into meetings, and someone got offended one time when, and a lot of people got offended when I started talking openly about my sobriety and my use. And they're like, you keep that for the rooms. I was like, keep what for the rooms? They're like, oh, you shouldn't be talking about what you did in the past outside of the rooms. I was like, what room? They're like, AA. And I was like, wait a second. If I want to tell people I smoked crack and did crazy that's on me. It's
right.
not business.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would see people that would just act so incongruent in the rooms, right? Now, I got sober in the rooms, right? But I would be like, wait, you're eating 60 donuts a day. You're cheating on your wife. You're doing all these things, right? So what are you talking about? Then this thing that would frustrate me, and this is nothing because I got sober through the program, and the program has helped me, where people would say, well, we're sober, get me a job. And I'm like, that's like, well, what do you mean get you a job? Like, that's, if you're not competent to do the job, I can't just get you a job.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So there'd be all these people that would lean on me in different situations, like, well, we're in the rooms together, that's what we do. Like, no. It's two different things.
Yeah, and I think that's what's hard is, like, they go in the rooms and there's a certain, it's like they say the old timers too, and it's like they're very set in their ways, and it's hard because times are changing. I mean, what addiction looks like for a 21-year-old now using pills is much different than over a decade ago when I was using pills. It's pressed with fentanyl. I mean, that word wasn't even existent when I was using. So times are changing. We are having to stay up on top of what's going on today. I mean, I remember hearing about lean. I was like, what's lean? And it's like, oh, cough syrup that kids are getting, and they're getting it prescribed to them, and they're putting that in Sprite with a Jolly Rancher, and it became the cool thing at a party. And I'm like, what? But, I'm like, okay, I have my history and what we used then, and things are completely changing. What I'd like to see is that the old timers in the rooms would have that same mentality, because, it's like a drug addict who steps into an AA meeting and they're unwelcome.
Yeah, I always had a hard time when people say, well, you can only talk about alcohol. Mm-hmm. And as I said, I was lucky. I walked into rooms in New York, was doing 3 meetings a day, had incredible mentors. There was great meetings back then, and it served me great. And I've still got the same friends. But nowadays, I see a lot of people feeling like they're not part of certain things because someone's telling them it has to be. Look, it's very simple. You're either making empowering choices and you're kind, compassionate, and you're a good person, or you're making disempowering choices and you're not kind, you're not compassionate, and you're not taking any responsibility for your actions.
Right.
It's really that simple, right? Are you a good person? Are you authentic? Are you bringing value to other people? And if you're not, like, then look at your behavior.
Right.
And I can't sit there and say I'm an alcoholic and I'm an addict, and I've got to sit with myself and say, well, why am I making these choices?
Right. And I feel like the new ones entering those rooms, the meeting really is for them.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're the ones that are so fresh in the process and going through a lot, whether they have 1 day sober or 30 days sober. I mean, the beginning phases of recovery are extremely difficult. And I know at the event we were just at, I saw a client of mine who came through our program a few years ago, I almost didn't even recognize him. He looked so good. And I'm like, oh my gosh, is that him? And sure enough, and he's doing great and wants to bring meetings into our facility and I also think it depends on where the meetings are located, like towns differ. So I know for like our Avila location, it's a big community, a big AA-NA community. So there's tons of meetings. There's beach meetings, bonfire meetings, so there's a big recovery world there, where here in Hollister, it's smaller. Naturally, it's a smaller town. So there's not as many options for our clients. So we have to do a lot of them in-house, which can be a little difficult when somebody is, oh, okay, I'm moving to Hollister. Where's a meeting?
Yeah.
And it's sometimes they have to go out of town or whatnot. But yeah, I mean, I feel it's really important for the newcomers to feel welcome and to feel like it's a safe space that they could talk about what they're going through and how they're feeling.
Yeah, I always found that interesting when I got some time under my belt, especially when I was going to a lot of meetings. I would only share what was necessary in the room. Mm-hmm. So if I could just feel people needed a little hope, I would share something that would bring hope to the room. And I never, ever, I got 17 and a half years of sobriety. Like, I remember the first 5 or 6 years, my shares were like about me. You know what I mean? Because you want to sound good in the room, and then you get a little bit more time. You get 10 years out of your belt. You're like, yeah, no, it just, if someone's struggling, I should be sharing for them. Do you know what I mean? It was always about how can I bring value to the room, and that shifts. And there's nothing worse when, the biggest thing I realize is there's nothing worse if we're not growing. Mm-hmm. And if when someone says to me, well, there's only one book, I'm like, there's no such thing as one book. There's thousands and millions of books in the world. You should always be reading, and you should always be, working on yourself. And I find any program that tries to tell you that it's locked into this one little box, it doesn't. No,
that just like there's no cookie cutter program. No. And I say that all the time. I mean, we barely started providing residential services at my facility. I was detox only for 7 years because the first phase is detox. That's what I knew. Everybody needs to start there, but not everybody needs the same program. I had a hard time transitioning into having residential services offered because I want to, and we still do. We really assess to make sure if we're not an appropriate fit for their longer program, we want to refer them to the appropriate place. I mean, there's 12-step, there's cognitive, there's small facility, large facilities, gender-specific programs. And it's really important that as professionals look into what is it that they need or what have they tried. And there's clients that come in, whether it's their first program or their 10th program, something's got to shift, right? And so if someone's coming out, I've already done this. I've done so many meetings. I already know the tools. I just need a detox and clean up. And it's like, well, no, there's something that's not clicking and we need to figure that out. And let's see what you've done in the past. And if you've done nothing but cognitive therapy programs, maybe we need to try a 12-step program, And so being able to figure out what it is that what they're going to benefit from is important. With the trauma piece that you had mentioned, I definitely feel that has a lot to do with it. We've all gone through different things. I mean, big T, little t, that, my friend Jason and I talked about that not too long ago. And it's very true because some people like myself, I didn't think I had trauma. I didn't have any big situations that happened with my version of what trauma meant. I'm like, oh no, I had a really good childhood. However, my dad wasn't present in my life for a majority of my childhood. So that's pretty traumatic. I just didn't know that would be considered. You know what I mean? So working through that, and then levels of anxiety and depression, we all have it. We all get nervous if we're going to take a test. We all get nervous if we're moving from one state to another state. Now, there's different levels of that, and each individual handles that differently. So what one may just be a little nervous to take a test, another one may just avoid it altogether. and trying to figure out the tools to deal with life as it comes is extremely important. And I feel that even if you're not an addict, those are things that we need to be educating our brains. Our brain's biggest organ in our body. And if our mind is not strong, how are we supposed to take care of everything else?
Don't you think we're all addicts, but like we're all addicted. We're all looking to avoid pain and gain pleasure. There's just different levels. Like how many people now, like I would love to do a thing where I said to people, okay, no sugar, no phone for 30 days. I mean, seriously, how many people could sit down without a phone and without like crappy, like sugary foods and junk foods and be able to sit down and sit with their thoughts? Like, I remember I was telling someone the other day when they were like, why do you stretch so much? Why do you do this stuff? And I was literally telling them, if I wake up with a bad back and a headache and I don't stretch out my back and work on my mind, then everyone I meet is a pain in my back and gives me a headache.
So true.
Right? And so you think about how people start their days responding to the world. They're never present. And they're addicted to so many things. We're addicted to so many things. But yet we go through the day thinking we're present. Do you know what I mean? Now, obviously,
Very
if you're,
much so.
You're doing cocaine, crack, and fentanyl, you're excessively drinking, you can't, and then if you throw in, some mental health issues, right, that could come through your DNA. I've got relatives that through the generational trauma, they're not well. Right. And no one's taking care of themselves or their mental health. That person is not going to function in the world. You know what I mean?
Right.
But when people just go, well, it's only one group of people, or it's one extreme. It's like, I'm an addict, I'm helpless, or everyone else is the addict and I'm not. Do you know what I mean? There's no middle ground. Like, no, we're all addicted to stuff.
Right.
We're all got issues.
And that's like the family. That's like, oh, okay, my son's addicted to fentanyl. Fix him. And it's like, fix him. We all need to come together as a family and fix the situation. And I see it so many times where it's like the family, I'm not the problem. I'm not the one using drugs, but they're the biggest problem. And you try to tell them that and it's like, oh, shame on you. I'm going to go on Google and write the worst
one to me is, the worst one to me is they'll call you, right? When there's a crisis and you do everything to get them centered and you go, okay, I'm here. And you set up the plan and you're like, okay, this is the plan. Absolutely. Crickets. But we had a plan. And then they don't call back. Then they call you back desperate. I'm like, no, I'm sorry, dude. Like, wait a minute. I'm like, nope, it doesn't work like that with me. I came to you when you needed me. I gave you my time. I set up a plan. You changed the plan. You didn't listen. You're the issue. You're the codependent one, right?
Right.
And now you know everything. Doesn't work like that.
Right.
Figure it out.
Exactly.
Figure it out.
Or it's what I tell families sometimes too is, okay, you've called because you can't handle the situation. So you've called a professional like we do in everything, right? I don't know how to fix my car if it breaks. So I take it to a professional in that field. But if you're expecting your child or your loved one to get sober on something that has them hostage in their own body, and you want them to take in the advice and the tools to get better, but you can't do it of clear, sober mind, we've got a real big issue here. And, that's really hard for some families to accept. It's a team effort. I use diabetes as, a very simple analogy. If your loved one is told you only have 3 months to live if you don't start exercising and cut out sugar, are you going to go make them an apple pie the second they get back from the doctors and say, okay, well, we're making pie and we're all eating it, but you have to sit here and watch? No, you're not going to do that. So if an addict is checking into treatment and professionals are giving the family support and advice on what they can do to support them in their recovery journey, why is there such a break in that and such, well, no, it's not our problem. Well, I'm not the alcoholic. No, but your husband or your wife is. So if you can't not drink to support them through their recovery, then there's the problem right there.
Yeah. And I think like for me, so because I never got any support in the sense of I still don't get any support. Not from my wife, but from my family. They have no clue. My parents are so out there, and so are my siblings. I just left, and I always tell people, they say blood's thicker than water, but if the blood is toxic, get a blood transfusion.
Yeah,
you get out.
But yeah,
you've got to change your environment. And there's that story years ago. You've probably heard it. The crabs in the basket. There's a little boy, and he goes to there's an old man fishing on a jetty, a wharf, and he has all these crabs that he's caught in a basket, and the little boy gets all nervous and says, you got to put a lid on the box, or the crabs will get out. He said, no. Let me teach you about life. And he goes over, and one crab tries to get out the basket, and all the other crabs pull the crab down. And it's that security of numbers. Mm-hmm. In Australia, they call it the tall poppy syndrome. If the poppy's too high, they cut you down because they want everyone the same. So I've always found, because I had to walk myself into meetings, and the crazy thing is, when I was on my book tour in Las Vegas, a person messaged me and said, "Oh, are you in Vegas?" I said, "Yeah," and I thought they want to come to my book signing, and they were partying with a bunch of celebrities. They're like, "Oh no, we're in Vegas. Could you get us some Coke and some party things?" And I'm like, "No, I'm sober a long time." And the girl literally said to me, so am I, but it's for my friends. And I was like, oh, wow. And for a second, I was a little like angry. And then I was like, no, I'm not angry because I'm not there anymore. Mm-hmm. But I was a little triggered for a second, because the crazy thing was, I was around some of the biggest rock stars in the world, and we were doing copious amounts of cocaine. I mean, I owned a bar with massive rock stars, and not one night I was with a friend of mine who's a big attorney agent, and he's like, I want to chat to you. I said, cool. And this was kind of his intervention. He basically said, you do a lot of blow, and maybe one day you need to look at it. I'm like, okay. And I'm expecting him to like go further, and he's like, but what do I know? Let's do a line. That was it. Like, what do I know? Let's do a line. I'm like, okay. I'm like, that was the level. So if I didn't make the choice to turn my life around,
right,
and it was a moment where superficially, I'm on the TV show Miami Inc. I'm shooting a pilot with Scott Weiland. I own a bar. I have access to, I never paid for a drug. It's just literally a free-for-all of insanity every night of the week. Every night of the week. I had a friend that came and stayed with me from Australia, and for 6 months, and he's just like, dude, does it ever stop? I said, nope. I mean, I could literally get on a plane, fly anywhere, and do an event and just get what I wanted.
Right.
And it's like...
And you had to remove yourself from that environment,
I had to stop.
Yeah.
What I did is I literally was like, I'm done, went into meetings, and had to open a bar literally 3-4 months later, because no one was going to help me. I sat in my house and I called a friend of mine and I said, God, I got investors, and they're like, can you open another club? And I was like, yeah. And breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I was in meetings. No one was going to bail me out. But the great thing is like, I got myself into this. I'm getting myself out. So when it came to finally getting out of like the club business, I was like, I can be anywhere. Did
you get out of the club business for your recovery? Like, you knew it was not?
It was really weird. So I was doing interventions, and I was always, I don't like, I got offered a lot of money I left New York to LA, and I got offered a lot of money to open some spaces in Las Vegas, and I didn't want to. And I was shooting some shows, and I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And then I did the TV show New York Inc., and then I took the franchise to Australia, and we did Bondi Inc. And I was doing interventions still, and doing my thing. And then it was my wife, we had the house in Vegas. She said, look, could you just not go back to the clubs? I know it's easy money. And I was like, yeah, okay. And I was like, all right, so if I just work and travel, we didn't have a kid, if I travel full time and just do interventions, I'm going to have to like go out on the road. Because the thing is, I could choose what interventions I wanted, right? and I was making a ton of money in the club business. So I didn't have to like worry. There was money coming in. And I saved money. I'm sober. I don't spend money on dumb things.
Right.
So we were good. And I said, but if I go all in to try to go just doing interventions and work with a few people in LA, a few companies, I'm like, I'll disappear, because it's like, if I'm on the circuit doing that and that's the only money we're making, then I've got to go on the circuit. So that's why I just kind of shut everything down, and I was getting offered shows. I was like, no, I'm just going to lean into just doing just interventions, and I did some companion work. But look, I'll be honest, I was in a good spot. I was getting big calls. I mean, I took a lot of bad jobs like that no one wanted. But yeah, I was also, I'm in LA, like, you know, I can outwork people. So when you start outworking people and you just keep going and you jump from one plane to one city to the next city to the next city, people go, call the guy. And I was, some of the people that I knew from the club business had got sober, and I was married into I'm very grateful. Like, I can admit it. I mean, been in good positions.
Right.
People I came up with in New York, like, I was standing at the front. I mean, here's a crazy story. In 2001, when I was at Bungalow 8, they shot a scene in Sex and the City, and it was me and the other tall guy, Amin. And I said to him, do you want to do the scene or what? And he's like, no, you do it. It was a couple of days shoot, and I was on it for like a couple of minutes, whatever. Ironically, so we both worked at Bungalow 8. It was at Bungalow 8. Now, 20-something years later, he calls me. He goes, I just landed a show on a spot on Sex and the City. And I was like, can you believe 20 years ago we were talking about being on Sex and the City together? And now you're like, it was in that clique. People I were coming up with, there was one of my closest friends used to work for P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, whatever you call him, as an intern. He was the drummer in a band I had. Fast forward 20 years later, he became Kanye manager's manager.
Wow.
Kanye West manager, sorry. Like, that's the kind of people that I started with. Like, we were like partying together, drinking beers, playing in clubs, doing cocaine, and then all of a sudden it's like,
that's crazy.
That's crazy. So when I make a call to someone that I've known for 20 something years, they're like, oh, dude, my guy that used to let me in the club. Do you see what I mean? And then if those people get sober, or if their kids need someone, they're like, call Mike.
Right.
So you know what I mean? It was just, a lot of it was timing. But I am nice to people. I'm a good person. I didn't screw people. I help people. If I've got leverage with, I got in with people years ago. I mean, Jason Strauss, who's one of the main guys at Tao Group, used to have a guest list when he had a little place called Lawan and Conscious Point. Him and Noah at a place called Chaos back in 1998 when I was the door guy.
Wow.
And now he's one of the main owners of Tao Group. And when I moved to Vegas and was going through, he's like, come work with us. And he's like, I know Mike from back in the club days. I mean, that's how long back, like.
Isn't it crazy? And it's crazy that, like you said, you're a good person and you help a lot of people. I mean, when we met and connected, I mean, you instantly were just, our energy just clicked, you know, and you're like, what do you need? I got you. I mean, those are the people that I want in my corner. Those are the people that I want to surround myself with, because it's like, I have a huge heart and help so many people. And my gosh, I can sit here for hours about all the times I've been backstabbed and burned. And it's like, why?
Well, you know what I realized as well? Look, think about this. So when I came to this country, I came here with nothing, right?
How old were you?
I was 23.
Okay.
I was a pup, 23.
What made you come out?
I just knew it was time to get out of Australia. It was too small for me, and I got a green card in a lottery. Here's a crazy story. All right, so I always tell people, doing the right thing isn't easy. Doing the easy thing is never right. I left Perth, went to Sydney, was at acting school. And mentors, I talk about in my book, having good mentors. I never had good mentors. So there's two types of mentors. Someone calls you, someone calls me. That's called a direct mentor. I can directly communicate with that person, right? An indirect mentor is me looking at someone else's life and figuring out what they're doing and looking at my life and not being optimistically delusional, right? That's not like if you look at Kobe Bryant, right? He looked at Michael Jordan, right? He may not have met with Michael, but he looked at how he played and studied him and played. And that's why Michael Jordan says the only guy that could probably beat me one-on-one was Kobe because he stole all my moves, right? If you look at a guy like Arnold Schwarzenegger, he left Austria, but he knew Reg Park was this American guy, and he basically copied Reg Park and then eventually met him. So I go, okay, I need to kind of look at these actors in it, whether it was De Niro or Pacino. I'm like, where are they studying? What are they doing? And I was like, that's how I've got to kind of, if I'm going to try and come to America. That was my way out, acting. I knew I could act. So I went to a school that Hugh Jackman went to, but I had a bad mentor. And he got me and another student really messed up one night. And it started off as like a fun kind of acting thing into really bad, where he took advantage of it badly. So the next day I went to acting class and I confided in a friend, and she didn't want anything to do with it because she was so embarrassed. I said, what do I do? And she's like, he's got to go. And I'm like, ugh. Now my linear path is go to this acting school, get an agent. That's what you do, and come to America. But I knew intuitively I had to do something. So I pulled the dean aside, who he liked me. And I said, look, he's got to go. She can't be at class and face this guy. He's a predator. And he'd done it before. And he's like, what do you want to do? And I said, well, if I leave, you'll kick him out, right? And he's like, but you graduate. I'm like, I'll just leave. I'll figure it out. I'll get to America somehow. So I leave. And I'm walking down this open air mall in Australia. It's called Politics Menswear. And I used to walk by this place and this guy's selling clothes. And they'd rag on me because I was going to acting school. So I always look to build rapport with people. And this was something now I've studied NLP, but I didn't know I would just find something what I could identify with. So the shop manager was part Greek. I'm part Greek. So I'm like, I'm just going to ask him for a job. So I said, Dean, I need a job selling clothes. He's like, to do what? And I was straight honest. I was like, I am going to move to America. And he's like, so you're telling me you're going to come and work for me and then quit? I'm like, yeah, basically. And I always say preparation meets opportunity is luck. If you're not prepared, you never get the opportunity. But you have to always be prepared to keep the opportunity. So he goes to me, okay, if you can sell clothes to the next person that walks in, I'll give you a job. I said, fine. Beautiful woman walks in like yourself. I'm like, okay, it's a menswear boutique. She's looking for either a husband or a boyfriend or something. I'm going to give her space. I turn around to Dean and there's 3 other shop guys there. I said, don't say anything. I got this. They're looking at me like, what? So I start just chatting to her, getting to know her. And I said, hey, what are you looking for? It's a menswear boutique. She goes, actually, it's for my son. I'm like, idea. I'm like, is he about my size? She said, yeah. And I'm like, okay. Now, I don't know the stock in the room, but whatever's in the window has to be sellable. Otherwise, it wouldn't be in the window. So I look in the window and I see an outfit and I'm like, give me 1 second. And I find my size and I go into the change room and I put the outfit on and she buys the outfit. He's like, you got a job. 6 months I worked there, was making a ton of money, but my goal was to come to America.
Why was your goal to come here? Just curious.
I just knew I had to be here. I couldn't explain the calling. I just felt it.
Okay.
When I feel something, and I think that's where people screw it up. When you feel, you lean into the feeling and just figure it out. Do not we overthink too much and we forget our intuition.
Right.
I just knew. 6 months later, a lady comes in, I do the same thing, and she's like, what are you doing in this country? And I said, I want to move to America. She goes, you should enter the green card lottery. I was like, what's that? She's like, there's a lottery. I'm like, yeah, you smoke crack like me. Lottery, whatever. The next day, the store's closed and we're putting together the window, and it's an open air mall. So you can see people walk in and out before like the shopping center opens. And I see her down the mall and she's got bags for the clothes. I was like, oh, she's going to return the clothes because they're for someone else, right? A significant other. So I'm hiding in the back. I think I was a little stoned. And I said to my friend, Al, I was like, cover me. I don't want her to like return the clothes. So she's banging on the glass and he's trying to ignore it. He's like, what's up? Is everything okay with the clothes? She goes, yeah, I bought Mike the green card lottery ticket.
Oh, wow.
I popped around. I was like, look, I'm going to be honest with you. I was hiding in the back. I thought you were going to return like the clothes. She goes, no. She gives me a big hug and she's like, you're going to win a green card. I went first thing in the morning. I bought it for you. That day, it's so crazy the universe is and God. I go to the embassy. And I said, is this legit? They said, absolutely. And I said, they're like, you got 2 days to get it in. So I used my parents' address in Perth because I was coming to America anyway. And I sent it in. They said, just put an introduction letter of who you are and you send it in. 6 months later, the embassy contacted me. I won a green card.
Wow.
Now, here's the crazy thing.
That must have been a long 6 months. Every day just waiting.
Not waiting, but how's this? It took me a year to immigrate, but here's the crazy thing. If I wouldn't have stood up for the girl and taken the linear path, thinking that was right, even though I knew it was the wrong thing intuitively, I never would have got a green card in America. See what I'm saying?
Right.
So I redeemed myself, right, getting back on the path, right, which is hard to do because we get temptations on the way, right? So the universe calls us individually, but what we forget is it's an individual call. It's not a conference call. So you have to lock into yourself, and it's lonely to take the hero's journey, right? Because along the call, there's going to be temptations on the path.
Right.
So we have to lock into ourselves every day, right? And forget the distractions because we've got nothing to prove. We have to try and improve the world.
Right.
Right?
It's so true.
So every day, if I can sit by myself in the silence, right, and listen to what I'm called to do, and then if I have a purpose, which is to use the talent God has given me, then educate myself enough by acquiring skills to bring value to you, I'm recession proof.
Right.
Right? Because you will pay me for what you value.
It's true.
Right? Now, I'm lucky that God gave me the ability to perform in front of people, speak, and act. But what happened was I was trying to prove to the world that I could do art and acting. So when I would get, exposure or money, it would go up my nose because I was always looking to be loved, right? Because I never got love. So once I shifted that and said, hey, forget that. How can I bring value to other people? God's blessed me with this ability to communicate. God's blessed me with these incredible opportunities. I have so many contacts. So what I do now is I give the contacts away. I'm always of service, right? Because there's nothing worse. And I've climbed the wrong mountain to be at the top of the mountain by yourself all alone. Nothing comes with you, right? So you want to be able to share it.
Right.
So when people say, why are you so generous? I'm like, well, it's not mine. It's all rented.
I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
And I always try to improve your life. So if I have 50 contacts and you're a good person, well, there's 50 contacts.
Right. Why can't everybody think that way?
Because people think that they take it with them in the end. See, until you have a near-death experience or you're faced with the reality of death front on, you think that death's an illusion. But death's reality, this is an illusion.
Right. Right.
We're collecting nothing.
Right.
It's all rented. Think about this. You go and accumulate a bunch of stuff on a superficial level. I make $1 billion, right? And I make all this money. And then when I die, they have a funeral, right? Some people show up and there's a wake. There's a party that I'm dead. And then what do people do? Fight over everything I accumulated.
Right. It's so true.
You can't take your toothbrush and your underwear with you when you die.
Exactly. It's so true. And we were talking about this earlier. I'm a big tipper. I tip exceptionally well. And a lot of times I'm like, how much am I going to tip today? $500, and that is something I've done for years and years. I mean, I was a server, so I knew how hard it was. I remember serving and people would come in and order just hot water and lemon. Hot water and lemon doesn't cost anything, but it is really difficult to constantly keep refilling, walking all the way to the back, getting hot water, walking it all the way back to them over and over and over again, and then get 73-cent tip. I'm like, oh, screw these people,
It's true.
So it's a lot of work. So I've always been a big tipper. And to me, that's my way of giving back to somebody that's working really, really hard for a very low dollar amount. And I know they probably have a family or they have something that they want to get. And like you said, we don't take anything with us. And I love to give. That's just who I am. I've always been that way. I have a huge heart. I love people. And anything that I could do to be of service to somebody else
You have to, but you are that kind of person. That's why I clicked with you straight away. Look, here's what people get mixed up, right? You've got nowhere to go. So when I tell people this is, look, I come out of my house, my neighbor has kidney disease, right? So I make sure if their kids need to go anywhere, I'll take them anywhere. On the other side, my neighbor had a stroke. So I make sure that she needs any help. I walk down the street, my other neighbor, she got cancer. So when I don't go for a walk in the morning, I check in on her. My other neighbor, this is even better, got cancer, okay? And had a stroke, right? I give him one of my books. My other neighbor across this is literally in my community. I haven't left my community yet, right? She comes out of her house the other day. This was a month ago. And I go, what's wrong? And she just unravels, right? And I go, let me help you, whatever. And she's like, I've got this toxic boss. I said, slow down. I said, what do you do? She goes, I'm an accountant. I said, okay, where do you want to live? She goes, in Arizona. I said, great. I said, all I want you to do is every day send out resumes. Okay? I give her a copy of my book. I don't say anything. 2 weeks later, she gets a job in Arizona, packs up everything, sells it. She's living in Arizona. She's like, I just needed someone to talk to. The other guy, I walk with him all the time. He goes to his wife, Mike's got a book, and she's like, let me try and get it into the library. I don't know she works for the library. She puts it in the computer. She's like, it's everywhere. Do you know this guy, what this guy does? She looks at the endorsements, and there's a few people that she actually follows that endorsed the book. Shauna Shapiro, a lot of great people, Kelly Catrone. She knocks on my door, and she's like, can I speak to you? I said, yeah. She goes, do you know your book's in like 300 libraries? I said, I didn't know. She goes, you walked my husband around the block when he had a stroke. I go, yeah. She goes, you've done all these shows, you're doing these things. I'm like, and? She's like, you're our neighbor. I'm like, do you think I walk around with a resume on my back? Mm-hmm. You're my neighbor. I got to do the right thing.
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
I was in the grocery store the other day, and I tell people this. Every time I'm frustrated, right, it's because I have a desire to get something that I want. I'm frustrated because I'm not getting what I want, but maybe the universe has a different plan. So I get a contract for a speaking gig. Now, I'm lucky. I get good money for speaking gigs, and the guy's messing with the contract. I let it go. I go to the grocery store. I always tell people, if I'm in the grocery store and it's 15 items or less, and I'm checking how many items the person has in front of me, I need to check in with someone because I'm worrying about the small stuff, right? Mm-hmm. There's a girl in front of me. She's swiping a card 4 or 5 times, decline. She's about to walk out. I'm like, where are you going? She's like, I can't afford my groceries. I'm like, I'll get you groceries. She goes, you will? I'm like, yeah. So I buy her groceries. And I said, what's your name? She said, Destiny. I said, there's your Destiny. Someone bought you groceries today. She goes, what do I owe you? I said, you know what you owe me? She goes, what? I said, you got to be a kind person because there's good people in the world. Mm. I give her a hug. I walk to my car. This guy follows me to my car, well-dressed dude. He said, what do you do? And I said, I'm a speaker, coach, whatever, write books. He's like, do you have a book? I said, I do. Always carry books in my car, always prepared. I give him a book. He said, do you want me to tell you a crazy story? I said, tell me. He's like, I have a credit union down the street with 250 employees. He goes, we were trying to figure out who was going to come and speak at our benefit. He goes, I come to the grocery store. I'm all frustrated. We can't find a speaker. He goes, I'm watching you literally buy this girl's groceries. And in my brain going, God, I wish this guy was a speaker. And I go, well, there you go.
Wow.
He goes, I'll call you up. He's buying the books and paying me to speak.
That is insane.
And what did it cost me? Groceries. Mm-hmm. Do you see what I'm saying? But that's the universe. That's my intuition. Right. That's God telling me, whatever you want to call it. I tell people, right, I put down the spirits and I connected to the Holy Spirit. Now, I get inspired, right? Inspired by spirit, right? You create by inspiration, by creation.
Right.
If you get out of the way, you create, you get inspired in spirit. The creator that created this creates through us if we get out of the way.
Right. I agree. I mean, and that's the biggest thing too. It's like it all comes back around, and I continue to give, and it's crazy how that happens.
Always.
You just not even thinking about it. You're doing something for somebody else, and then a door opens for you.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if everybody would operate that way, maybe people wouldn't live in misery and they would have, better lives.
What's the pain?
Right.
But what is the pain? Like when I tell people, look, yeah, I can go through physical pain. I have colitis. I have some stuff, right? But if I get out of my own way, what's the pain?
Right.
I'm living beyond my means in my fantasy land of what I should have.
Right.
What?
Yeah.
What, a better car? Why, it's transport. A bigger house with 23 bathrooms and I can only use one bathroom. You know what I mean?
It's very true. Mike, I have a question for you. So, well, I mean, I love your book. It's amazing. And so I'm so glad that I have these on hand. How can people order your book?
Oh, well, there is Barnes & Noble's carries it.
Okay.
If you want to go to the bookstore and support your local bookstore.
Yes.
Otherwise, Amazon is king. Yeah, everyone knows that Amazon is king.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And what advice if somebody was in crisis, and is there a phase or a phrase or a word that you hold on to when you're in a situation?
Yeah, there's a tool that I use. It's a very simple technique. Whenever I'm feeling disturbed or I feel like my emotions are hijacking me, I just stop. I tell myself to stop. The second thing I do, it's a simple method called stop, is then I start to breathe. So it's stop, take a breath. And I don't mean hyperventilating. I mean centering myself, breathing slowly in through my nose, expanding my diaphragm, right? Holding that. Some people use box breathing. I always tell people, and I use the analogy very simple. If you watch a boxing match or a UFC fight, you see two athletes in fight, flight, or freeze mode. Or for us, it was feed, right? They're in their sympathetic nervous system. If they make it to the corner, all the cornerman says is breathe. By breathing, you get out of lizard brain and you get into your prefrontal cortex where you can think rationally. After you breathe and you center yourself, 4 things are going on. You're afraid you're not going to get what you want. You're going to lose what you have. You have guilt and shame for something you've done in the past, or you're worried about the future. Has to be one of the 4, right? Guess where you're not? Present. So if the immediate danger is actually gone, sit in the present moment, right? Start to journal some solutions, and then P is to proceed. Take the next right action. That may be to call someone. That may be to watch something inspirational, but you don't suffer in silence. So if you can learn the new practices to stop, take a breath, observe, then proceed, you create a gap between the stimulants coming in and how you choose to respond.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on. And if any of our listeners want to find you and follow your journey or get inspired, how can they find you?
Instagram, however you want to say it, the for me, the for an American, Mike_Diamond. If I check my messages, don't send me a dumb message, but if you're really struggling, you need help, I am very resourceful. I can help you. And Twitter, all the same. Yeah. And Facebook, Mike Diamond.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike.